Karl G. Maeser was probably the most refined and educated, certainly one of the most refined and educated men to join this church in its first 50 years of existence. Several years after Brother Maeser's death, a proposal was made to construct a memorial building in his name. Not downtown on University Avenue, but high atop Temple Hill, where a new campus might be built consisting of as many as 3 or perhaps 4 buildings someday. The faculty and the student body did take heart that in 1912, the Maeser Building was at least partially complete, and the university would give diplomas to its first 4-year graduating class. But even as graduation plans were being made, equally urgent plans were underway to sell the remainder of Temple Hill for the development of a new Provo suburb. The university simply had to have the money to survive. The graduation services would conclude with a sales pitch to the community leaders in attendance. When Alfred Kelly was introduced that morning as the student speaker, he arose and stood absolutely silent for several moments. Some in the audience, in fact, thought he had lost the power of speech. Slowly, he began to speak, explaining that he'd been much concerned over his remarks, that he'd written several versions and discarded every one of them. And then early one morning, he walked north to where the partially completed Maeser Building stood. He wanted to gain inspiration from this hope of a new campus, but he felt only grim disappointment. Kelly then turned his eyes toward the valley below, which was also still in shadow. As morning came, the light gradually worked down from the hilltops and slowly advanced to the spot where Kelly stood. He said he partially closed his eyes as the light approached, and yet was startled by what he could still see. He stood as if transfixed. In the advancing sunlight, everything he saw took on the appearance of people. Young people about his age, moving toward Temple Hill. He saw hundreds of them, thousands of them, coming into view. He said he knew they were students because they carried books in their arms as they came. And then Temple Hill was bathed in sunlight, and the whole of our present campus was illuminated, not with one partially completed building, not with homes in a modern subdivision, but with what Kelly described to that graduating class in 1912 as temples of learning. Large buildings, beautiful buildings, hundreds of buildings which covered the top of that hill and stretched clear to the mouth of Rock Canyon. The students entered these temples of learning with their books in their hand. As they came out of them, Kelly said their countenances bore a smile of hope and of faith. He observed that they seemed cheerful and very confident. Kelly sat down to what was absolutely stone-deaf, rock-solid silence. Not a word was spoken. What about the sales pitch? No one moved or whispered. Then longtime BYU benefactor Jesse Knight jumped to his feet and shouted, "We won't sell an acre. We won't sell a single lot." And he turned to President George Brimhall and pledged several $1,000s to the future of the university. Soon others stood and joined in, some with only a widow's mite, but every one of them believing in the dream of a Provo schoolboy. Every one of them believing in the destiny of a great university which that day had scarcely begun.